My name is Zach Wortzel, and I am the manager of experiential learning for the Bauer College of Business. I am also the career counselor for undergraduate marketing and entrepreneurship. Thank you for joining us for our final Recruiters Get Real panel of the summer. We have a great panel today with three representatives from different oil and gas companies with focus on tech. Super excited to get the conversation going. And I'm going to turn it over to Jacoda to introduce herself first, and then all of our other guests introduce themselves.
Thank you. Well, hi, everyone. I'm glad you were able to make it today. I'm excited to get to talk with you guys. So my name is Jakota Langley. I'm at ConocoPhillips. I am an ERP operations and logistics analyst. For college, I went to the University of Oklahoma, and I received my MIS degree from there. I graduated back in 2017. And so I've been with my company for 4 years now, and this will be my third year to be a recruiter for U of H. And I will pass it over to Josh.
Thanks, Jacoda. Hi, my name is Joshua LeCour. I am with ExxonMobil, and I graduated from Bauer out of the MIS program in 2015. Go Cougs. I'm currently a threat intelligence lead with our industrial IT team. Been doing that for about a year now. Absolutely love it, and look forward to talking with y'all and answering questions. And with that, I will pass it on to Otilio.
Hello, everyone. My name is Otilio Rios. I graduated from the University of Houston College of Technology in May of 2019. I've been with Chevron since then. I am working as a software engineer in their sort of sales and platform management space, so mostly in their downstream operations area.
Cool. Thank you so much for being here with us today. To get our panel started, can you all talk to me a little bit about how you got into your position and what did your career path look like? Maybe how did you kind of figure out this is a place you wanted to be? Can we start with Josh?
Sure. So I've been with Exxon for about 6 years now, and I am currently in my 4th full-time role with the company, and I also intern, so it's quite the journey. I started interning in 2014, working for the server ops team, and then I joined the company full-time in 2015. Started in Baytown for basically doing a little bit of IT infrastructure regarding for the laboratory land that they have over there. Moved to Spring and started doing proof of concepts on emerging technology, mostly focusing on the cybersecurity space. After that, I did that for 2 years and joined industrial IT as a cybersecurity engineer and finally became a threat intelligence lead. So it's been an interesting journey, progressively getting closer and closer to cybersecurity. And with that, I will pass it on to Jacoda.
Thank you. So I came into ConocoPhillips through their IT Student Leadership Forum. It's a recruiting event that they have each fall. And I participated in that. And then out of that, I received an offer. And so, like I said, I started in 2017 and I came in through their IT new hire rotation program. So it's a 3-year program. And throughout those 3 years, my first year, I was an automation developer. And then the second year, I was a business analyst supporting our finance organization. And then my third year, I was an analyst supporting one of our custom applications called ISO, the Integrated Safe System of Work. So that was my third rotation. And then after the rotation program, you interview and get into a full-time position. And so there was a position open on my team. So I transitioned into the ERP operations and logistics analyst and stayed on my team. So that's been my career path so far. Otilio, pass it on to you.
So go ahead and take it from there. So I actually did not intern with Chevron. I did 2 internships with other oil and gas companies beforehand, doing IT operations and IT technician work. In addition to that, I had like a lot of side projects that I was working on as a web developer, and applied to Chevron my senior year of being at U of H. My first year at Chevron, I spent more in like a full stack web development role, and now I'm moving into a data engineering role the second year. So
Cool, thank you. I think this really provides good context for the conversation. Can you all provide some information, kind of what interviewing was like for your positions? what should students prepare for? Should they prepare for technical interviews? What did that sort of look like? Otilio, do you want to go first with that?
Sure. So could you repeat the question?
Sure. What did the interviewing kind of look like for a position? What can students prepare for? Should they prepare for technical interviews, stuff like that?
So there will be a fair number of technical questions, and I would say obviously you want to get those right, but that's not necessarily or at least in my eyes, that's not necessarily the most important part of it. It's how well do you communicate your thought, your train of thought to the interviewer. I think in my particular case, there was one where I might have not even got one of the questions necessarily right, but the interviewer understood that I was getting in the right direction. So I would say in terms of technical interviewing, I'd say do a lot of mock interviews, watch maybe even some interview videos for other companies that can help you get in the right sort of frame of mind and understand what type of skills the technical interviewer is looking for. So it's not always, are you right, but can you effectively communicate your train of thought and show me that you know how to tackle a problem you may not know the answer to from the start. And I can go ahead and pass it over to Jacoda.
Thanks. Yeah, a lot of what you said is very similar to what we look for, diversity of thought, well thought out answers. But at ConocoPhillips, we do not do technical interviews. We do the STAR method of interviews. So that's situation, task, then your action, and then results from that. And so we ask those kind of questions, and we look at it as, we can see your transcripts, we can see what classes you've been in, what your grades are, what your GPA is. And so we take that as, the technical skills, but we want to know, what does your thought process look like? How do you go about your problem solving? And those are the kind of things that we look for more. And I would say also lots of mock interviews, and you can look up STAR interview method questions and have different answers and different thought out situations that you can answer for multiple different questions. And so that was one of the best ways I think helped me prepare for my interviews when I came in through ConocoPhillips. And I believe, Zach, you asked what do the interview processes look like? So at the career fair, you have the opportunity to be extended an invitation for an interview. And then there are 2 interview processes. So they're about an hour long each. And then you have the opportunity to talk with different recruiters from ConocoPhillips and go through probably a series of 5 to 10 STAR method questions, interview questions. And then based on that, we will evaluate you for an offer. Josh.
Thank you, Jacoda. It's very similar to what my other panelists have mentioned. At least my experience with Exxon, it was very much traditional and behavioral style questions. I did not personally have any technical questions, but there have been discussions about potentially going that route. And I would say that an overwhelming majority of interviews that I did do were that more traditional behavior style questions. For that, Jacoda mentioned STAR. I absolutely recommend that. I will put extra emphasis on the R, because when you're really, really nervous, when you're in the middle of that interview, that's usually the one that's always been dropped, is then recruiters have to go, okay, so what was the results of that situation? I also recommend trying to think about some questions in advance, especially if they are more that traditional one. So you have the very common ones of, give me an example of a time that you had to show leadership, or give me an example of a time that you had to overcome an obstacle that you weren't originally planning for. Think of many of those. In fact, I would probably recommend at least have 2 of each, and you'll find that many of those questions are actually interchangeable. The challenge that a lot of people have is trying to think of those answers without having done any of that prep work.
Yeah, I think that's really, really perfect advice. I speak to what Josh says. A lot of times when I am meeting with students about preparing for STAR method interviews, the one thing I say is, if you don't say the R, it's like watching a movie that cuts off 10 minutes before the end, and you're just like, that's great, but what happened? Like, so it really is important to say those kind of full interview questions. So I got a question that came in from students that asked about if a student maybe applied to one of your companies, but didn't for a full-time job, or an internship but didn't get it the first time, can you apply again in a year? What would you give them as advice to potentially go through that process of applying again? Josh, did you want to start first with this one?
Sure. I mean, short answer is yes, absolutely. Apply every single time. I mean, for y'all are continuously getting more and more skills. You're networking as the program goes along. So if you have an opportunity to apply again, absolutely do it, because in theory, you should just be a stronger candidate than the first time that you applied. Other than that, I mean, as long as you don't do anything damaging, and what I mean by that is if you lie in an interview, that's probably one of the worst things that you can do. If you don't know something, then just be honest and say it, and that's fine. We don't expect everybody to know anything or everything, sorry, but you know, long story short, absolutely apply every single time. Otilio?
Yeah, so I can't say I've been in that position where I've applied. I think it was my sophomore year, not with Chevron, but I applied for one company, didn't hear back, and then junior year reapplied and actually got an interview back from them. So as Josh mentioned, the person who's applying 1 year ago towards the person who's applying now are two very different people. You've had time to build your expertise, possibly take classes that might have given you more insight around some technical aspects. So I would strongly suggest, yeah, definitely do it again. Obviously focus on maybe it might be a good idea to look at who applied that year ago and trying to find the differences and emphasize, you know, how you've grown when you do reapply. Go ahead and pass it over to Jacoda.
Yeah, I think what you both said is very spot on. Something I would just encourage you is to not be discouraged if you don't get that offer and let that keep you from talking to the company again, because from your point of view, you just maybe communicated to that you didn't get the offer. However, from our point of view, we may not have had as many numbers to be able to hire people that year. So it might be something that it really isn't on you for the reason you didn't get that. So don't let that discourage you from coming back to that company. And if anything, if I see a student who comes back year after year and is very interested in our company, that's only going to add, you know, an extra star to their name. So definitely come back and talk to them again.
Cool, thank you. I think that's really good advice and helpful for students to know kind of what that process could look like. We had a student who has an undergrad in geophysics, but then is getting a master's in marketing and data analytics. So can you all talk about potentially what opportunities there are for students who may not have majored in business as an undergrad, but may be getting a kind of second degree in business? What type of opportunities there might be for students who have kind of a diverse background in their education? Jacoda, do you want to start with that? Sure.
So the short answer is at ConocoPhillips for our IT rotational new hire program, we do not hire MBA students. And there's a few reasons for that. And that's because of our rotation program, our company is wonderful at teaching individuals the skills that they need to be successful in that role. And so for that reason, we don't pursue master's students. But although it is IT, we do have individuals within our program that have pursued degrees in engineering, whether it's petroleum engineering, electrical engineering. And so it's not specific to MIS or computer science. Josh, you want to take it?
Sure. Unfortunately, I don't have a lot of experience recruiting master's candidates. I do know that ExxonMobil has hired masters, and typically at the career fairs we have a separate recruiters for that. You'll have your MIS, IT recruiters such as myself. You'll have maybe supply chain, finance, accounting, and then you have MBAs as well. So I would highly recommend you talk to them because I can't really give you the correct information that you're looking for. Otilio?
Yeah, kind of in the same boat. I can't give you the official answer. I can say that I am aware of some people who do have master's degrees and have been hired into the Chevron Horizon program. I personally know a gentleman who I believe got a master's degree in business analytics is now working as a data scientist, but I don't know what the official stance of the company is at the moment. So I would encourage you to speak to your recruiters about that.
Cool, thank you. I think that offers kind of some advice there. So I got another question that just came in that is a similar question for but more on the undergraduate side. Can you all talk a little bit about students' year classification as a factor of determining who is offered summer internships? Do you usually recruit only juniors and seniors? How can a student that's maybe a freshman or sophomore still interact or network effectively with your companies? Josh, do you want to start with that one?
Sure. So I will say in my experience, we typically hire primarily from the junior, or not hire, but we find internships for juniors and we hire from the seniors. That doesn't mean that as a freshman or sophomore that you shouldn't come and talk to us at career fairs or at your student organizations. I personally absolutely love talking with freshmen because that way you have a lot of time in order to find out what the classes are, what are the recruiters looking for. And to be honest with you, I really wish when I was a freshman and sophomore that I would have been as active as I could have been in that recruiting process, because it would have probably helped me out a lot down the road. Jacoda?
Yep, so we have hired interns from freshman year all the way until their junior year, and then we, of course, hire after someone graduates from college. So it just depends on experience and what you're very interested in. And I would say that hiring from the freshman class isn't as normal, but it is something that we've had done before. And you asked, what was your other question? Ways to get involved with the companies. So most companies, at least at ConocoPhillips, we have 2 major recruiting events on site that we hold in Bartlesville, Oklahoma, and they last for 4 days. And it's the Student Leadership Forum and the Innovation Challenge. And so the Student Leadership Forum is more going to be your business case type of event, and then your Innovation Challenge. The Innovation Challenge event is like a coding challenge. So those are the 2 ways to come on site, and those are great. We have freshmen, sophomore, juniors, and seniors come on site for that. And so, but just at any rate, like freshmen, I always recommend go talk to the companies that you're interested in. And because if you go your freshman year and then you go your sophomore year and you go your junior year, recruiters will remember you, and that's always a good thing. So that's my advice. Otilio?
Yeah, I think they both kind of hit the nail on the head. I know I have helped mentor some interns this past year who were as young as freshmen, I believe, but I don't know what the official stance is on how many of each class we take. But even if you don't get in that freshman year, I would really strongly encourage you to go meet the recruiters, because they will remember you, definitely, and building that relationship really goes a long way towards possibly getting an internship or an offer later on down the road.
Cool, thanks. I think that's really good advice. The earlier you talk to whatever companies you are that interested in, it will be something that helps pay off for you all. So I think a good question just came in. Do you have to have any background knowledge on oil and gas before entering oil and gas? If so, is there anything you think students should really make sure they know about? But if not, is there anything you wish you knew before going into the industry? Otilio, do you want to start?
Sure, I can go ahead and start. So I know both of my internships were with other oil and gas companies, but I was mostly working in an IT operations and IT technical role there. So while I did have some knowledge of what the company as a whole was doing, I wouldn't say I had a lot of oil and gas experience. And even then, what I'm doing with Chevron is kind of in an entirely different space of oil and gas than what I was doing with those other companies. So I mean, having some general knowledge would definitely help, but I think a lot of it is going to be things that you'll be learning once you either do an internship or, get the offer. Even in oil and gas, there's midstream, downstream, upstream. There's just so much of it that it's hard to say that you can go in and say, yeah, I know oil and gas real well, because it's just so large that you might know one spot of it, but there's just so much going on in the broad spectrum of it. I can go ahead and pass to Jacoda.
Yeah, so I did not have an internship with an oil and gas company. I interned at a consulting firm. So on that side, I had no prior knowledge. But I would say that you want to do your research before you go into an interview. You want to research the company. Are they a midstream or downstream company or upstream company? And figure out what their operations are and where they're located, and just try to get as much background knowledge as you can, just to be prepared. You don't have to go in and know everything by any means, but it shows that you're interested in when you do that background research. And it just shows that you've done what it takes to get there, and you are very interested in the company. So that would be my advice. Josh?
So I would say that you don't have to be an expert. When I was at Baytown, they worked a lot with plastics and chemicals. If you don't know about all the different types of ways they test plastics or that they try to make products, that's perfectly fine. I would recommend doing some level of research, especially working at ExxonMobil. The amount of prospective students that have came up to me at career fairs and mentioned that they didn't know anything about the telecommunications or cell phone companies is a little bit awkward. So make sure that you actually know a little bit of a background of who you're talking to. And you can even go and look to see, what new public projects the company might be working on. Just express an interest. Make sure you just do some research versus going in there purely blind.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice. I mean, we tell students obviously all the time, it's 2021, you have a computer in your pocket, so there should be no reason why you don't know about what a company does or other things that they offer. So that research is definitely super important. So a question that I always get, and I think it's something that's coming in too, is how important is GPA? Is that something that you all use in your hiring? Is it a factor? Is it not 100% a factor? Josh, did you want to start with that one?
Sure. So GPA is absolutely important. At ExxonMobil, we typically look for someone who has at least a 3.5 or higher, which sounds a little bit terrifying, but when you think about it, that's basically an A/B student, give or take. But that is also a rule of thumb. If you have a lot of other very, very unique history, passion, then, we, depending on the situation, sometimes we can talk a little bit more depth about that. That said, one thing you got to remember about a GPA is a GPA can help get you the interview, or at least want to be one of those factors. It won't get you past the interview. Jacoda?
Yep, I think you hit the nail on the head there. It's the same for us. I think our minimum GPA is a 3.25, but once you are considered for an interview, the GPA just gets you in the door, and it pretty much is up to you then to nail your interview. Otilio?
Yeah, so as they both mentioned, it is definitely a factor, but it's not the only factor. I think in some cases, especially like in my case, I'm, a software engineer. If you can show a portfolio of work outside of school, even that goes a long way. So having a certain GPA gets you through the door, but after that, there's a lot of other factors that determine, you know, whether or not you get an offer.
I think that's really good advice, that can help students kind of figure out what they need to have besides that GPA. Building off of that, can each of you talk about what you say are some technical skills students could learn now to help them prepare to be successful in a job search at one of your companies? Otilio, did you want to start?
Yeah, sure, I can start it. So I'd say the technical skills honestly is dependent a bit on the role. So I can't sit here and tell you, oh, you need to know this programming language because depending on the role, you might be using any type of different one. So I'd say critical thinking obviously is very important. You want to focus on kind of more generalities. So critical thinking and problem solving are two big issues or two big technical skills that you really need to be able to showcase. And I'd also say there's a fair number of soft skills you want to be able to showcase as well. So communication, you're going to be working on a team 9 times out of 10. So you need to know how to communicate, not just your own thought, but how to communicate within a team. Um, in our case, so for the College of Technology, we have quite a few large team projects that are based around the last year and a half. I know this is a Bauer event, so if I'm assuming you guys have something similar, I'd say, kind of highlight that to your recruiter, say, yeah, this is, you know, sort of team building exercises that we've done and what the results of that were. I'm struggling to think of other technical skills at the moment, so I'll go ahead and pass it down to Jacoda.
I wouldn't say that there's a set skill set that you must have to come into ConocoPhillips. One of the things that I loved about my company and why I ultimately chose to come work for them was our rotation program. And our rotation program has opportunities in pretty much every realm of IT that you can imagine. We have cybersecurity, analytics, programming, more the business analyst side of things. And those are just a few. And so there's not one skill set that you must have, programming. And I was an MIS student and I did the basic programming classes and but that was it. And that was more than sufficient. As I mentioned earlier, everything that I've needed to know for my job, I've been taught by my team members, by mentors, and that's been very helpful for me. Like Otilio mentioned, the most important things I think are your ability to be a critical thinker, to problem solve, and then have those soft skills to be able to say, hey, I don't know how to do this, but teach me and I'm going to have a great attitude. And I think that will help you be the most successful. Josh?
Like the others said, like the different roles at ExxonMobil are so broad that it's hard to say you have to go for this one specific one. Obviously, if you're in a developer role, having prior developed experience is going to be progressively more important. But I mean, I'll be honest, I haven't been a developer in any of my roles, and I've been in 4 different positions since I've been in the company in 6 years. It's all about the willingness to learn, to adapt to changes. Like we saw in 2020, you definitely have to be able to adapt at a moment's notice, especially if your boss asks you to. But I know usually what I would recommend to others is find something that you're passionate in. If you absolutely love developing, go pursue that more. If you want to know a little bit more about infrastructure, go do it. But the challenge that we've seen a lot is if you're coming from the MIS program specifically and all you've taken is just the Java class and just the database class and you haven't actually gone to pursue any of those other technologies further, even if it is something that you originally learned in school, I absolutely encourage you to just dig deeper and chase that passion, just keep going.
Sorry, to add on to Josh's point, just to give you an idea, I've been with the company some 2 years now. I've gone from full stack web developer to data engineering. The technical skills, the tools that you'll be using can change at any point in time from role to role. So that's why we really need to iterate. It's not about a specific skill set. It's about, as Josh mentioned, are you able to learn on your own and are you willing to chase, I guess, that knowledge on your own?
I think that's really good insight because I think sometimes a student might think I need to know X, Y, and Z when there's a lot of that softer skills that feed into that as well. So I think that's really helpful. So I got a question that came in that was asking about do you all can you all talk about the type of positions that you might hire for that for students that are beyond MIS. So students that might be some of the other Bauer majors, either marketing or finance or accounting, or those students able to apply for some of the roles on your technical side too, if they have some of those skills. Jacoda, can you start with that?
Sure. So for our IT rotational new hire program, we would typically look for majors that are more associated to IT. So, but we have our finance department and supply chain and HR. So if you are in those kind of majors, I would say at the career fair, go find, well, I guess you can't physically go find our booths because we won't be there in person, but you can virtually sign up to talk with those recruiters and if you want to work in those areas. But if IT is something that you're passionate about and you want to use, your finance skills, but you really want to come into IT to use those, you can explain that. And that's something that we're very, diversity of thought is important to us. And so if you can bring that to the table, we are definitely willing to have a conversation about that. Josh?
So I can't speak much for, just folks who majored in accounting or finance or supply chain, I have seen situations where someone might be a double major, maybe they're a double major with MIS and supply chain, or they minored in finance or minored in accounting, where a lot of times that has absolutely helped them in the role that they're doing. Maybe they're supporting a financial application, and a lot of that background has helped them be even more better at that role than they would have, or at least not that they would have been good there, but help with that respective learning curve. But unfortunately, with the roles that are purely supply chain or something along those lines, I would highly recommend you to talk to those respective recruiters. Otilio?
Yeah, kind of same message on my end. I really only have exposure to the IT function, so for any of those other types of roles, yeah, definitely speak to your recruiters and get more information on that.
So I think that just show that for kind of you all work for large companies, that there will be those different recruiters for different majors. So students should be able to find out who would those recruiters be at a recruiter or something like that. So just know if you're not an MIS major and you wanted to go to one of those other functions, there would be recruiters for those. Jacoda mentioned something that I wanted to follow up on, and I think would be a good topic. You mentioned diversity of thought, and maybe if you have a finance background, but you also have interest in IT, how could students potentially talk about that to you in an impressive way? So how would they how could they talk about maybe transferable skills they have if they may not have the kind of technical background? Jacoda, can you start with that?
Sure. So I'll just say from my own personal experience, I didn't feel like I was coming into the company super technical by any means, but I wanted to do more, I thought, of the functional side of the business. And so I, in my interviews, just talked about how I really enjoy problem solving and working with different teams. And I was able to bring in past experiences of the organizations that I had worked on in the leadership roles and I was able to talk about those in the sense of I wanted to bring those skills into the company and be able to use those to help my teams be successful. And so it's okay if you're not just the most passionate programmer ever. That wasn't my story by any means. But and just kind of a side note, I would say that just advice would be coming to whatever company that you're going to go into with an open mind. And I think we come out of college and we may have just an idea of exactly what we want to do. And I said I came in and I wanted to get that functional experience. And my first rotation, I ended up being an automation developer. And I was a little nervous because this was very much outside of my comfort zone. But I was encouraged by so many people at ConocoPhillips to take that leap of faith and go into a role that you may not be super comfortable with and take the opportunity to learn skills that can help you later on in your career, and to just be very broad-minded in that. And I think that was some of the best advice I was given, and that helped open up a whole new realm of thinking for what I wanted my career to look like. Josh?
So for me, it kind of what I mentioned before, it really comes down to passion. If you have a lot of those unique skill sets, if you're double majoring or minoring, or even if you just do something on the side, just make sure you express that passion. You might not be passionate about development, you might be passionate about something else, but if you're just minoring in this because that's what friends recommend you to do, or that's what you read on Glassdoor is the best way to get a job, that's not going to be as impressive as actually saying the underlying reasoning for why you're doing that. So if you're minoring in accounting, maybe you just really absolutely love accounting. Maybe you have parents that are accounting and you've always just fascinated by how they do what they do. There has to be a story with it, and that's what I highly recommend. Otilio?
Yeah, I think to reiterate Josh's point, there has to be a certain amount of passion. I think when I first went to the career fair for Chevron, I didn't, for example, have any of my driven projects or programming projects on my resume. I spoke to the recruiter. They asked me like, what are you doing right now? I talked to them about the things that excited me about my current role, which was process automation, scripting. And they said, it sounds to me like you have a lot more experience in the programming space than you're letting on. And they kind of, urged me, put that stuff on there. And then when I did, that's kind of when I got the ability to, that's when I went into the next step of the interview process. So definitely like to speak to your recruiter and talk to them about the things that excite you. They can sort of help you fill in those gaps.
Cool.
Just one other thing I wanted to
Yeah.
add to that is, as you even go through your career, I think as Jacoda mentioned, what you're passionate about now, it might change. You might learn about another role, especially in a large company, that you absolutely want to get more and more involved into. So when you do get into your professional career, that's when you want to make sure that you're having those type of follow-up conversations with your supervisor, maybe even networking with those teams, because as your personal appetite changes, make sure you pursue those passions, not just purely in college.
Yeah, I think that's really insightful advice. I mean, that stuff is going to change, and really make sure to take advantage of the networking and opportunities that a bigger company potentially could offer there. So I got a question that came in. Do you all have any advice or tips for a student that's going into their full-time job search but doesn't have internship experience previously? How could they talk about the experience they do have in the best way possible while recruiting? Josh, do you want to take that one first?
Sure. So internships are absolutely a positive, but they're not a guarantee. I said, just what do you do outside of your classes? Do you do a lot of work with student organizations? Maybe you have to, work full time to support yourself, and that's why you couldn't do an internship. It's not purely that you didn't get an internship. It's what else have you done outside of school? Jacoda?
Yep, honestly, I think you answered that great. That's how I would have answered as well. Otilio, do you have anything to add?
No, same answer. Yeah, try to focus on the things you've done outside of school and kind of bridge that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I think that's helpful. It's something that we definitely hear a lot as career counselors of how the best to talk about the experience that you do have. So can you each talk a little bit about what your recruiting timeline looks like? When would internships be posted? When do you think would be best time for students to apply? Do you recruit 6 months out, a year out, those type of things? Jacoda, do you want to go first?
Sure. So our recruiting season this year is we will be at the Bauer Career Fair, and there's another career fair that Friday that we're going to be at. And so, we'll talk to you that day. And then if you're interested in applying with us, you have to go to our ConocoPhillips website and sign up for an interview. And then if we extend an invitation to you, then I believe we will try to schedule an interview the next week with you and get you an answer pretty quickly for steps forward. And then we recruit mostly in the fall career fair. Sometimes we'll do some spring events. It just, the past couple of years has been very different for us, of course, because of COVID. And so we're constantly in a state of flexibility or having to be flexible.
Jacoda, can you clarify, is that for full-time or internships?
Oh, both.
And that would be internships for next summer or for the following summer?
Yes. Sorry for not being clear on that. Yes. So the career fair this year, we are recruiting for internships and new hire positions that will start next summer. And then additionally, in the spring of 2022, next year, our applications for the Student Leadership Forum and the Innovation Challenge will open up. And then it's open for about 2 to 3 months, I believe. And then those events are hosted this fall. So those, the applications have closed for this fall, but then look forward to the spring and there will be new applications open.
Cool, thanks.
Thank you. Otilio?
Pretty similar. I don't have the official information, but at least speaking from my experience, they are typically at the Bauer Career Fair. Similar process, you'll go there, apply online, and then within a week you should hear back, and that's for both internships and full hires.
I also can't speak for our numbers this year specifically. Generally, we do an overwhelming majority of our recruiting in the fall for both internships and full-time. You'll go to the Bauer career fairs, the MISO, I think it's called just the MISO career fair. I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head. And the interviews will be a few weeks after that. The internships themselves are almost exclusively during the summer. We don't typically do during the year or during the semester internships. It has happened on a very, very few small handful of cases, but I wouldn't necessarily plan on that. But once again, I don't necessarily know what numbers we have for internships full-time this year.
Cool, thanks. I think that provides good context for students that are potentially looking to apply with you all. Can each of you talk about what's something that you wish you knew when you were in school that you think could help you now, or would help you now, or has helped you now? Otilio, do you want to start first?
Yeah, I guess to iterate on maybe what Josh and Jacoda were talking about earlier, you don't always so I mean, I applied as a software engineer for a very long time. I thought no one would take me seriously without a CS degree because some companies are just that way. But that was kind of a learning that I figured out later on when I saw a lot of my peers were getting, offers from Chevron from similar companies for software engineering roles. So kind of one of the things I took back was don't underestimate yourself, even if you don't necessarily have the perfect sort of candidate role or template. If you don't fit the perfect template for a specific role, you can supplement that in other ways. In my case, it was a lot of personal projects and kind of the school projects that we did where I was able to supplement and show I have, strong team building, sorry, I have strong team collaboration skills. I have good communication skills. I have the ability to learn on my own, and I have a whole portfolio to showcase that. So I can go ahead and pass it off to Jacoda.
Yes, so I'll make my answer a little broad. So what do I wish I could have told myself when I was going through the process that you are all going through? I would say be open-minded and positive about the role or the job, the company that you're looking into. There are, when you're in college or, you go into high school and then you go into college, your perspective, or mine at least, was so small of the world. And I was very thankful to get to go work for ConocoPhillips. They've been an amazing company to work for. So I was very fortunate to get the opportunity to work with them, whereas I didn't even know how fortunate I was going to be. So what I would tell myself then was, when I'm looking for a company, don't just look at the, what your salary is going to be and how much vacation you're going to get. Also, when you're looking at the companies and you have all these offers that you are comparing, look at the bigger picture of benefits. And, if you want to have a family one day, what is their, maternity leave look like? And things like that, when I was in college, I didn't even know to think about. But now that I've been at ConocoPhillips and I'm very thankful for how wonderful our benefits are, that's something that I recommend to students is look at those things. And, as you're comparing your offers, really take all those things into consideration as well. And then, yeah, I think that's one of the big things, in addition to, be open-minded, be positive when you're looking for your position. Josh?
So for me, I think I mentioned one already, that I personally wish I would have been more involved earlier in the recruiting process when I was a freshman or a sophomore, not necessarily starting more full throttle when I was a junior. Honestly, I also think very, very early on, I almost undervalued my own skills and capabilities. In fact, when I was a junior, looking at the ExxonMobil tables, the Chevron tables, I was like, oh, that's so far away from me. I'm not even remotely close to that. And I was very fortunate that I had a lot of my own professors that pushed me like, no, go absolutely talk to those tables. And I'm very, very happy, for obvious reasons, that they did push me to do that. Another thing that you have to remember when it comes to these career fairs and interviews, it's a two-way. It's not purely the companies trying to evaluate if they think that you're a good fit, a good candidate for them. You should equally be trying to consider if they are a good fit for you, because realistically, not everybody is going to be a good fit for oil and gas, and we wouldn't want to necessarily push somebody who wouldn't be a good fit into trying to force them into a mold. So you need to identify if oil and gas is truly for you at the same time.
Can you expand on that a little bit, Josh? What would you say makes someone a good fit for oil and gas versus maybe something that, say, may not be as good a fit for oil and gas?
So I'll answer that question a slightly different way, but if I need to clarify, please let me know. So I know for me, when I was a junior and a senior, I was married at the time, and I was trying to evaluate what companies I wanted to go to. And at the time, I told myself that I was not wanting to pursue a career in consulting because I did not want to personally have to travel that much. Versus I had a lot of my classmates at the time that for them, especially very early on, a job was a job. And a lot of them were actually very, very unhappy in their first few years about where they went just because they weren't really trying to evaluate the company. They were purely looking at just getting a job, and they might have been looking for salary and the package, but just that personal culture wasn't for them. So I highly recommend just, with either with networking or talking with people who intern at those respective companies, make sure that that culture is something that is a good fit for you.
Cool. Does do either Otilio or Jacoda have any input on that also?
Yeah, I would say when I was looking for a company to work for, it wasn't so much about what industry it was in. It was more about what opportunities am I going to have for my career? What does their work-life balance look like? Do they support that? How are my interactions with the recruiters? Do they seem down to earth and just, like normal people, or, are they trying to put on a front and make their company sound better? I had an internship with a consulting firm, and I lived in a very large city. And after having that experience, it was a good opportunity for me to realize what was really important. I didn't want to have to work those 60, 70, 80-hour weeks and for my full-time career. And so going to ConocoPhillips and having the opportunity to spend a week on site and get to really know some of their individuals that worked at the company, I just fell in love with the people and the atmosphere, the culture, the values that the company supports. And that's more why I chose the company. It wasn't because it was necessarily in oil and gas, but it's been a great career so far. As I mentioned, work-life balance was important to me. And so at my company, we'd work a 980 schedule. So I have every other Friday off. And coming out of college, sounded really awesome to me. I love traveling. So I take my 3-day weekends very often, and we'll take trips. And so those are some of the things that I was looking for in a company. So I think Josh mentioned it's very much of you are interviewing the company as much as they are interviewing you. And you need to be honest with yourself of what's important. Sometimes you can take more money, but what is the cost of your work-life balance, or vice versa? Otilio, do you have anything you want to add?
Same kind of general note, but kind of wanting to reiterate Josh's point about why it might be important to start, interviewing or speaking to candidates early on. Essentially, what you want to figure out is this culture right for me? And that might be difficult to do if you're applying your junior or senior year and this is the first time you're seeing the company. If you have the ability to go freshman, sophomore year, you can sort of get an idea of what the company's like, because one recruiter might seem different from another recruiter. So if you speak to more of them, you can get a better idea, okay, what is the general feel of this company? I think, yeah, for me, it wasn't so much oil and gas, it was a cultural fit. We also have 980s. There was a lot of things about the Chevron culture that I really enjoyed, and that's why I picked Chevron.
Yeah, and something to add on to that is, of course, the career fair is very important to go and visit with the recruiters, but I know my company, at least, we go to MISO, to those type of organizations, and we'll do presentations and talk about resumes or talk about different opportunities within the company. And I'm sure Chevron and Exxon does that as well. And so get involved in those organizations and take advantage of getting that face time with recruiters.
Yeah. Another thing I'll add as well is, at least for me, there's a lot of times when I was going in there, and I would go with the assumption that I'd really like to work for this company. And just even talking with the recruiters, sometimes even the respective interviewers, it just drastically changed my opinion. And it could just be that one-off individual, but that's why you have to do that longer end networking. There were some companies just based on my involvement with the MISO sessions, I think, where a company goes and talks one-off, that just based on the conversation that there wasn't anything necessarily wrong with the company. It just wasn't something that I personally wanted to go into for whatever reason. With Exxon, one of the things that I just liked a lot about it, I mean, the pension is always nice, don't get me wrong, but really the opportunity, which you'll see at a lot of different large companies, especially large oil and gas companies. But I didn't want to be in the same role doing the same thing for the next 10 years or necessarily having to hop ship to another company to do something unique. I would have never imagined that I'd be able to do cybersecurity when I was in MIS, and here I am today. And I couldn't have done that without being an ExxonMobil.
Thank you all. Yeah, I think that's really insightful and good advice about how students should look to really evaluate any company, oil and gas or not, that they're going to go into. Otilio mentioned something that I wanted to follow up with as well. You mentioned having personal projects and a portfolio of your work. Can you talk a little bit about how you brought that up in interviews and how you talked about that, and our portfolio is important? What do you think? What do you think about about that process and how students can maybe talk about those things?
Sure. So I think in my case, I had a specific link out to my GitHub page at that point in time, so it showed all of my previous projects. I think what that really showcases is, one, the ability to learn on your own, the drive to learn on your own. And then in my case, I had projects in, I think it was like Python, Java, Ruby on Rails. So it was like you could see that I had some understanding in several different areas. I obviously it's not a requirement. I don't think anyone goes in there and says, "Where's your GitHub link?" It's obviously very supplemental, but I think having something like that can go a far way, because I mean, I honestly don't know if anybody actually went and searched my GitHub, but having it there was definitely a talking point for some companies. They ask, okay, what have you done? What are the projects you're working on? And that kind of just gives you an ability to showcase technical skills that you may not have been able to do somewhere else on your resume.
Any input from Josh on portfolios or something that you look for? Is it something that do you think could be helpful for students to have?
If you have a portfolio, I believe it absolutely can be important. I personally didn't, and maybe that's one of the things I can add as a list of regrets that I didn't go and personally go down that route more and create a portfolio. I'm a little jealous of Otilio right now because I'm having to teach myself Python now, which would have been probably a lot easier if I could have done it when I was in school and talk to professors versus having to exclusively rely on Google. I've seen some students put even QR codes on their resumes. I'm not saying you have to do it, but I did personally find it a little bit unique that you could put a little QR code to your LinkedIn if you wanted to have more information that you could fit on that one pager, or if you wanted to have it go to your GitHub account. But mostly, what do you have that just makes you stand out? Whether that's a portfolio, whether that's stuff that you've done in your projects. A lot of that for me came out in the interviews and the one-on-one conversations that I had at recruiters during the career fairs.
Yep, I would echo what they said. It's not required, but if you have it, that's awesome. I didn't have one, and it wasn't something that we often in our interviews ask students. We never ask students for their portfolio, but in our interview processes, we're asking questions. We'll ask, tell us about a current project you're working on, and we enjoy seeing someone's passion and as they can talk about the projects that they have going on. And so to be able to say, oh, here's a link and to show everything, that would be very cool, but not needed.
Cool, thanks. I think that's good insight on ways that students can approach that. So Josh mentioned something that I wanted to follow up on too. Learning about new skills now. What are some ways that as professionals, you all are still learning your new skills, and maybe what are some ways that you think students can gain some skills maybe outside of the classroom as well that would be helpful in their job search? Josh, do you want to start?
I mean, I guess first it depends on what the skill is. If you're trying to, Otilio can probably speak a lot more into developing than I can, but I imagine YouTube is a very cliche but very, very powerful start. talk to people who have been developers, maybe even a lot of your classmates. I know a lot of my classmates were significantly stronger in developing than I personally was. Talk to your professors when it comes to networking. I didn't have a long, very strong networking background prior to joining ExxonMobil, but I know, there are people who give away old switches on Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace if you just want to get your hands on one of those and just play around. And if you do that, it can also make a pretty great story to also talk about in an interview as well.
Either Otilio or Jacoda, any insight there on kind of ways maybe outside the classroom that students can gain skills that be useful in their job search?
Sure. So, I mean, one thing just to kind of speak on this, it's a never-ending process. So don't think once you get, the job or the internship, it stops. Even now, like, so Chevron-wide, we have a thing called Pluralsight, which is, basically kind of like Udemy. You go there and you learn. In my current role, it's like I'm continuously having to learn new things because I'm switching roles pretty often. In terms of like building that out outside of school, like I mentioned, you can go to either Code Academy or one of these things and follow along. That to some degree helps, but I think what also helps is being able to apply it outside of just the video. Maybe just, I guess this is going back to the personal portfolio thing. It's like, okay, I've learned this thing, but now I applied it in a way that was outside of just that video and being able to showcase that. I'm trying to think of ways you could do that for other skills outside of just programming, but I'm kind of struggling to think of anything at the moment.
Yeah, those are both great examples. I would suggest to talk to recruiters and ask them, what are the new technologies or softwares that your company is pursuing, and Azure or different things going on in the cloud, different analytics tools. You can ask them about those and then go and do some research. And if you're interested in getting cloud certifications, those are things that you can pursue kind of outside of your actual skills, and just to show that you're willing to take the initiative and go learn extra things is that just shows really great initiative.
And one thing I kind of wanted to show, at least for me, is, if you just want to go and buy a little $20 Raspberry Pi and just play around with it and tell me about all the fun little projects that you had with this little device and just reloading it, it's just something unique and it shows your passion.
Yeah, I think that's all really good info for students to have of things they could potentially be doing now to help out down the road. We're getting really close to the end of our hour. I've ended every one of these sessions with the same question, and I'm not going to change it this time. But for our last question, can each of you just give whatever you think is your one biggest piece of advice for students who are going into recruiting right now, whether full-time or internships? What's one thing that you give them as the kind of biggest piece of advice to go into that job search? Josh, do you want to start first?
Sure. I mean, honestly, while you're in school, take advantage of all the opportunities you have, whether that's with your classmates, with your professors. You also have access if you wanted to go and do one of those trainings. There's a lot of different sites and programs that offer free or severely discounted training to students that we wouldn't normally get not being a student. Other than that, it's, once again, highlighting your passions and trying to show to the recruiters how you're unique in comparison to others who are in the exact same program. Jacoda?
I would say do your research, do the before work. Before you get to the recruiter fair, have a top list of companies that you would like to talk to, do some research about the companies and what the companies do, and then talk to people, network. If you know anybody that's already at that company, ask them what their experience has been like. And like I said earlier, keep an open mind and to not be discouraged if you plan to talk to a company and your talk just does not go the way you think it's going to just not be discouraged and continue pushing on. And it's daunting, and you'll often find that recruiters that are sitting on the other side of it, like myself, can also be nervous going into those conversations. So just as you're preparing, also know that they're just people and they're just wanting to find other individuals that will fit into their culture. So just be yourself, be honest. And as you are doing virtual career fairs, I would say look presentable, look nice. There were folks that I talked to last year that were, sitting on their bed in their t-shirt type thing. So look nice, use your cameras, and you'll be good. Otilio?
I really hope that was from other institutions. I'm not going to make you answer that, but it would hurt my heart if that was Bauer students. So it would hurt my heart a little bit.
I will not specify then.
Thank you.
Yeah, to reiterate on both of those points, I think honestly, just putting in some work early, if you can get, I wish I could go back in time and just convince freshman me to start going out to the career fair, even though you don't have necessarily a lot of technical skills at that point in time. You're in it for the long haul. Don't get discouraged, because I know it can be very daunting. You see these same companies every year and the lines are massive. It's like, how are they gonna recognize me? Well, part of it is, if you're there every year, they're more than likely going to remember you, hopefully for good reasons. But it's keeping an open mind, being persistent, and having a positive attitude are all really important.
I
And
think
something else I would like to add is, if there's a company that you really want to work for, tell those reasons to the recruiter. I want to work for this company because X, Y, and Z, and I've done my research and I'm passionate about these things, and I see that the company, also supports these efforts within the community, or whatever your reasons are. I would be forthcoming with that information.
I'll add one other thing as well that I wish I would have done more when I was going, is talk to, especially if it's a company that you absolutely want to work for, don't just talk to one recruiter at the career fair. See if you can talk to multiple, 3+ if you can. Different recruiters are going to have different personal criteria and what they're looking for. We're all trying to find people who are good fits, but just like y'all, we're all different. We're all unique. We're all looking for different things, at least as far as the small aspects are concerned. So try to talk to more than one person if you can.
Well, I think that was really great advice. I think just over the course of the hour, you will help provide really good insight for our students. Again, thank you all so much for being our guests on our final Recruiters Get Real for this summer. And hope everyone has a great rest of the afternoon. And again, just thank you so much to our guests from Chevron, ConocoPhillips, and ExxonMobil. Have a good afternoon.